Welcome back, everybody. Dana, I don't know what kind of segue you're cooking up in there.
I'm looking out my window and I'm
Yeah.
seeing my big palm tree and birds that are coming in and out of it, and asking myself, is it real? Does a tree exist if I don't see it? How's
if
that for?
a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound
Yeah,
if no
does it
one's
make a
there?
sound?
Right.
I That always bothered me, like just as a proverb or whatever you want to call it. And then someone because there was no answer to that, right? It drove me
Right.
nuts as a kid.
Oh, that
And then
because it was an open loop. That's why
yes,
you were upset.
yes.
Okay.
So someone finally said to
Got
me,
it.
it depends on how you define sound. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, well, it would fall and it would hit the air and it would create a sound wave.
Okay.
But if there's no one there to perceive the sound wave, and I knew the anatomy of the ear and how it works and everything, and I was like, that's an answer. So does it create sound? Yes. Is it perceived? Depends on what's nearby. So it does make a sound, but might not be perceived. This is a great segue to this
Yes.
idea um, of what is. I'm pussyfooting around the words because we are, of course, surprised, going to get in the cracks a little bit with some of what we're talking about. But what exists out there versus what's going on inside my neurodivergent brain. Most people that have know they're neurodiverse for any length of time know that there's a chasm between the neurodivergent brain and the neurotypical brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
As evidenced by when I get in a group of my neurodivergent students, we don't have any trouble with reciprocity. We understand each other. We don't get our knickers in a twad about stuff. But if I say those same things to someone else, they're looking at us like horrified. Like, how are these people having this conversation? So that idea of, we could say the reality is, it's not that we as neurodivergent folks are defective or disordered, to use the words that you see over and over, or are impoverished and this kind of stuff. But the reality is our way of moving and thinking in the world is different than the neurotypicals. That is the reality of that. I think a lot of people really get stuck in, to dovetail off our last episode, can you drive or can't you not drive? The reality is you may not have the skills to drive, but if you just stay stuck in that beginning part, you can or can't drive. If someone were just to say to me, nope, you're autistic, you can't drive, that feels really containing. It doesn't feel like it sees me. It doesn't feel like it's offering any ability for dialogue or exploration. It's like foreclosing on me, right?
Yeah.
Versus, you talked about, they go to OT, and then there's actually specific training you can go to see if you can acquire those skills. Okay, cool. So that's the reality. The reality is, if I get overstimulated when I pull onto a highway, it can be really dangerous. I know, and I'm becoming increasingly aware that in certain situations, when I express myself in a group of all neurotypical fellow faculty, although one I question, I'm pretty sure he's ADHD, but he won't admit it. He may listen to this. I wonder if he'll figure it out that I'm talking about him. Aside from that, I mostly, because I've been a psychologist for a long time, I've sort of learned the lingo and can communicate myself well. But there are times where we really hit each other. And it's clear to me that I'm misunderstood. My reality is that I've said a certain thing, which is like the tree making a noise, right? Their perception of it was different than the noise I made, because they are their own autonomous human. And as we know, perception is like, when I hear a sound, my ear has all these mechanisms to transfer that sound into vibrations and get it into my auditory nerve. And then it doesn't just go to my auditory cortex of my brain. It spreads out everywhere because my brain has learned what certain sounds are, what they mean, did they bother me or not bother me, right? So that's what perception is. the other person's hearing or reacting to what you've done or said or believe or whatever is their perception. That is their reality, right? So when we were first talking about whether we want, how we were going to talk about this topic, you said several times, I do reality checks with folks. And I was like, by what is the reality though? By whose accord? Who's defining the reality there, right? And it's a really important question to ask, because if you just think that the person with the privilege and the power is going to be the person that says the reality check, that feels oppressive, it feels dismissing. You're not seeing me, you're not helping me. Versus the reality is, if you get behind the wheel of a car now, it's probably not going to go well.
Yeah.
Let's go forth and see if we can have you acquire these skills, knowing that the neurotypical way of teaching driving isn't going to work on you because it's for neurotypicals. Let's do a neurodivergent version of helping you learn to drive, right? That would make sense. So you've got these two different realities, which really are realities. They don't fit together. So how do we figure out this space between? And that's what I think, I've said this before, but the DSM part where we say we have social deficits always bothers me, because it's more of that gatekeeping, you're doing it wrong. The reality check is you're doing it wrong, versus how are we exploring what's happening? I want to know more about what is in there than you just can't do it, right? And so to say something like you can't, you have weaknesses, or you can't deal with things socially, is glossing over and feels ableist and yucky to me. Versus, what are the particulars of this for you? Where is your reality different than my reality? And let's talk about the in between. It's so important, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's about that individual, right? Maybe you can acquire the skills to, my wife, for example, we get along really well because we're both anxious. We understand each other's anxiety, right? She does not like driving in tunnels. Phobia, gets really squirrely, doesn't like it. If we had to go through a tunnel, like someone's life depended on it, she'd do it. She wouldn't like it. But for the most part, we can avoid tunnels. It's not a big deal, right? We don't really have to. I'm not afraid of tunnels. Even if I'm driving and go through a tunnel, it's actually worse for her, because then she really feels out of control. So the reality of it is, probably nothing's going to happen in the tunnel, but it could, right? So how do you meet that person and learn about them to say, what is it about that scares you? You know, it's that feeling of confinedness. She's also doesn't like elevators. She was visiting her mom and was in the basement of a house in Montana when they had an earthquake in an old house. So that was all, that same thing was coming up, like I'm going to be smashed. If I just stayed on what is wrong with you? You can't drive in a tunnel. I don't learn anything about what is that for you. It really is about a claustrophobic feeling. Mm-hmm. And then the lack of control and the non-ability to get out of it, right? So someone who's autistic, maybe, who feels like driving is overwhelming, maybe they can drive in town on side streets where there's not a ton going on. Just don't ever go on the highway. I know a lot of people that never drive on the highway. Mm-hmm. So that then acknowledges that person's reality and meets them there, rather than this oppressive, you can't do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, Dana, I think what's lovely is to be able to have the ability and the space to be able to understand and be understood, which is
not always there.
It's not always there. And I will say, like, I think a lot about this from a neurodivergent person in the neuromajority world, right?
Good way to put it. Yeah.
And so a lot of times, like for me, as I'm doing transition assessments, I'm looking at college readiness. I'm helping students determine if they're college ready, because it's so much more than, academic achievement.
Right. Yeah.
I often look at, like, what are the demands of the environment that you want to be in, right? You want to be in a big college, university, whatever environment to obtain a degree, right? Like, that's what you want as a goal. I'm not here to say, oh, are you kidding? You can't do that. Like, I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is, though, do you know what those demands are?
Yeah, let's give
right?
you the reality check is you're going to be
Right.
in a lecture with 300 people. Is that
Right.
something you think?
What
Yeah,
what are
yeah,
your what are your note-taking skills look like? Oh,
right.
you need
Yeah.
a note taker. Okay. Do you know how to
Hmm.
advocate for at DSPS for a
Yes,
note
yes.
taker?
Yeah,
Like, no, I don't. Okay. So that's one what's a gap that we can empower you with, right?
yeah, that's
Oh
right.
wow, I don't love math. Like let's say I've got a
Mhm.
math disability.
Yeah.
Okay. But you want to go into math and sciences. You want to go into a math and science major. Okay. I'm
Mhm.
not here to tell you that's no. Let's look at the coursing, that coursework, that
Yeah, yeah.
curriculum schedule for
Yeah,
to become a blank major. It has
that's right.
these 6 math courses.
Yep.
What are you
Oh,
thinking about it? Right?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, why do you like
Mhm.
that? Right? So again, in this kind of interaction, it's still very person centered. It's still
Yeah,
very empowering. It's still very um I would say trying to include that person in their own self-determination, which
yeah,
I love. I love all those pieces. There's just some times where there's things that happen in the
yeah,
neuromajority that there is an expectation. You're not going
yeah.
to be able to go into a 300 person class and vocally stim the whole time.
Right,
And
right.
that I'm not saying you should be ashamed about that at all.
It's the
I'm
hard reality of a neuromajority, right?
yes.
Yeah.
That is and that
Right.
that the social expectation of that
Mhm.
situation is quiet.
Right, right.
A
Yeah.
library, a movie theater, whatever this is. So I feel like it's so challenging to as we talk about social expectations.
Mhm,
What
mhm,
is that balance between accepting who you are, not having to mask chronically all the time,
mhm.
um, not having the messaging of shame. I'm broken. I'm different. I'm weird.
Right, right.
Whatever all those things are, right? And
Mhm.
also understand that these things unfortunately still exist.
Yeah,
How do
yeah,
we not be complicit in that as
yeah.
well as help this person be in the world in a way that feels more comfortable for them?
Right. Right. And I
I don't
do,
really, yeah.
yeah, my experience and most of my clients' experience is just what you're saying, that in principle, it sounds great. In practice and reality, it
Yeah.
doesn't happen. And those are where the big
Yeah.
hurts come, where there's a
Yes.
sense of feeling misunderstood or rejected, or social rejection and some of those kinds of things, pulling away from social connections because they have been that way. It's been hurtful, or people have rolled their eyes, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
That is the kind of the cold hard truth of the vacuum of space, so to speak, versus um, uh, what can you achieve with some of those reality checks, right? And then there's all that layering that you have to go through for yourself. Like, okay, there's always going to be that chasm, and that really sucks. And I have to learn to deal with that and let it go. And are there things that I can do to make it better or not make it better? And it does. It's sucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where the questions, why am I like this? Why is it so
Mhm.
hard for me?
Yes. Yeah.
Why is the world like this? Why is the
Yeah.
world full of jerks? Why is it
Yeah.
like, you know,
Exactly.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, those are
And you
just
have to go through
areas
that. You have to
you
live through
do.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
You
It's
do.
all part of it.
And that is literally where your like AA comes
Mhm.
in, right? Like those are things we can't control, right?
Yeah, I was
We,
telling Gwen before we started taping, I'd said it had a thing happen at work that I was really upset about, and it was happening to all of us. And I just sent out an email saying, this is terrible and we need to fight back, and, come on. And no one responded. No one responded. I mean, I've kept checking my sent emails, like, did it send? So weird. Was I over? What the hell? I spent like 3 hours going, should I not? I looked up, can I recall a message I've already sent? Turns out you can only do it for like 30 seconds on Google. After that, it's gone. You can't do anything. Damn it. What can I do? What? Oh, and I go all the way to, this is the thing that's going to out me as the imposter at work, and they're finally
Mm-hmm.
going to say, Dana, you're not working, you're leaving, goodbye. I mean, that's the level I go
Yeah,
to.
you went to being fired.
Totally getting fired,
Right.
yeah.
You were fired already. Mm-hmm.
I was already fired in my mind, like
Mm-hmm.
3 hours in, right?
Yeah.
And then the reality check was finally just, I don't talk about the stuff to my wife works at home while she's working because she's working, you know? And I actually can distract her with the stuff working. So I'm like, all right, I can hold on to it, which was a growth curve too. Normally I
That's
just
yeah.
go into the kitchen and barf it out. And I'm like, no, I got to wait. So her workday ends. I tell her what happened, what's going on. No one's responded. I must have been a total idiot doing that. See, now I'm going to get fired, which it's helpful because she's like, I can see where you go there. I might go there too. But she just said, that is such a charged topic you were talking about. And it's a work issue and you're on work email. And I kind of knew where she was going with it. She's like, maybe no one wants to respond because they don't want to do something like that in writing in a work email. And I was like, oh, and that was the reality. I didn't like it. I wanted people to get into a dialogue. I wanted us to talk it out
Mm-hmm.
on email. But the reality of it was, I'm not going to get that need the way I want it. And I could confront that and say, okay, yeah, I can see that's a chasm in those two different worlds. I totally get it. And then after that, it was, we can talk about it in the next meeting we have, which I don't go to because I'm off of meetings for the summer. So it's like, okay. But yeah, those are those things that you have to kind of, the reality checks, or what a student of mine called them years ago, which I thought was a really nice phrase, was finding a place of safety. So by that meaning a place that I feel secure in again, right? My place of safety. And for me and for most autistics, it's understanding what's happening.
Yeah.
That's our place of safety. We need to know the whys. Because if we don't understand what's happening, our fantasy is going to go to all the way to me getting fired. And see, this is the proof that they've hated me all along, which is not true. But the place of safety is, okay, that makes sense to me that they're not responding in email. I might do the same thing if it were about a topic that was a different topic and I didn't want to get into it in that. So, but those are really hard, like, because we go from 0 to 60 in light speed, right?
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out how can you get a reality check or a place of safety or a reframe that fits with your mindset that you can kind of finally go, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And then you can let it go, right? And those
Yeah.
can be really hard when you're really charged up about something and your reality doesn't match the other person's reality. It's really, really hard. Yeah.
The word that comes to my mind is distress. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
there's a
Yes.
felt and
Yeah.
present distress about it.
Yeah.
Dana, how do you feel this plays with, not that I want to bring in a diagnosis, but I can see a
Yeah.
diagnosis coming in, zooming in from the side, which is there's this an anxiety piece, specifically maybe
Yeah.
social anxiety,
Sure.
right? This idea of, okay, great, I look like a complete idiot in front of
Or
people.
that rejection
Yes,
sensitivity,
the
which isn't
rejection
a disorder, but
sensitivity.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that could happen in zero point 0.3 milliseconds
Totally.
for
Yeah.
an autistic brain, even an
Mhm.
ADHDer, because
Yes.
the thinking is so fast
Yeah.
and so big
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
you've already gone there. And
Yeah.
this is where I really believe therapy can be very powerful,
Yeah. Oh,
which
yeah.
is to have that frame and space in order to
Hmm.
understand. Like, this is the place where we try to understand ourselves. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
now we don't have this open loop that's literally being filled with what
Hmm.
ifs all over the place
Hmm.
in the worst
Yeah.
case scenario.
And our sense of justice, our sense of fairness
Mm-hmm.
plays into that too. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
years ago when I was a vet tech and the original clinic that I was working at, I had decided to leave. It was when I was going back to school, but I decided to go to another clinic. And I gave my boss notice. And, not to, well, toot my own horn. All the vets that were there said, you're the best tech we've ever worked with. You're awesome. We love you. We never want you to leave. And so when I said I'm leaving, they're like, no. And I gave them 3 months notice because we knew we had another tech that they had just hired. And I wanted to have that time to diligently teach her all the ins and outs, so that when I left, there wasn't a huge bump. It was all out of this place of doing the right thing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, my boss calls me into his office and says, "Today's your last day. Give me your keys.
What?
You're done working." The real wrinkle of the story was I got all the way home, a half an hour drive home, and realized I'd given him my apartment key. Couldn't get into my apartment. I had to drive all the way back. Yeah, it was, yes, this is a trauma memory right there. And I did. I went to therapy the next day. But I was so distraught. I totally could not. This is way before I ever knew I was autistic. Could not figure out how this person could do this. How horrible was this? The only person I could get a hold of was my dad, who's not a great person to talk to for emotional support, but he knows the corporate world. He was an accountant for years and years. And he said, "I hear you're upset. I totally get it." He said, "But this is really standard practice in a corporate world or in a business world kind of thing." And I was like, "Tell me more." Because even then I was like, "I don't understand. Please explain it to me." He said, for most bosses, they don't see that 3 months as you being really diligent. They see it as an opportunity for you to become this poison arrow because you're leaving, to either show everybody else like, "Ooh, this is a terrible place. That's why I'm leaving," or to slowly seed the, "Oh, this place is terrible. That's why I'm leaving," or to sabotage the environment, which I would never do.
Right.
But it was a common mindset in that scenario. And it totally made sense to me, even though it was never anything I would do. It gave me that place of safety. I was like, "Oh, that's why my boss did that. He isn't a total evil person. He was coming from that mindset. It makes sense to me." Didn't like it, didn't want to accept it. I thought it was wrong anyway, but I had that understanding then, so that chasm was bridged, right? And that's can be really hard to get from someone, to have that So keep searching those things that are in your mind to try to make sense or frame something. It will help the distress a lot if you can find that magic bullet.
Yeah. Yeah. Managing the thinking surrounding it, I think, is
That's the hard
is
part.
the hard part,
Yep.
because in many ways it's the thinking that's driving the distress.
Right,
So,
exactly.
in that way,
Exactly.
and sometimes we don't always have that clarity, I think, as
Mhm.
psychologists. Sometimes we're like, and I do ask that question in therapy all the
Mhm.
time, did the feeling come first or did the thought come first?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
for me, like that, I'm going to approach that differently. Even
yeah.
though we probably end up in the same place, because like
Right.
inevitably both are going to play
Yep.
together.
Yep.
But I think there's this overall difficulty if you're a neurodivergent person to find comfort in the bigger, badder
Yeah.
neuromajority world.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard,
And a lot of times you don't get it.
and you don't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
That could be all over the place. That could be at work. That could be at, picking up
Mhm.
coffee. That could be everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's no necessarily changing those things.
Yeah,
We
and that
hope to
totally
change those things. I
sucks.
mean, that's
Yeah.
why we do this podcast.
Right.
We don't do
Yeah.
this we don't get paid. Like, yeah, it's funny to me because it's like, Dana and I don't get paid for this podcast. We just
I get
keep
to spend time with Gwen, and that's payment enough. So
that's
there you go.
payment enough. But
Yeah.
our goal, our real goal here is
Yeah.
to have nuanced conversations, which is so the opposite of sexy.
That's
There
right.
is nothing sexy about nuanced conversation
That's right.
because we talk about, well, it depends, and if it's only here, and sometimes it's
Mhm.
here, and well, it depends on your personal factors, and
Right,
maybe
right.
you've got a trauma history, maybe not. Like
Right, right.
there's no clear cut answer here, but the
There's a
idea
lot of
is for us,
intersectionality. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we want to have these conversations, and that unfortunately, like the neuromajority exists, so therefore ableism exists. And we
Right.
even have ableism in ourselves. I love that you said that in the previous
Mhm.
episode because
Mhm,
I
mhm.
do. I have a lot of
Yep.
isms. I
Oh,
notice
yeah.
isms all over the place.
Yep.
Even though I am a person, like an ethnic person, I have
Yeah.
racism.
Yeah. We're not separate from the pond we've grown up in. Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
am I proud of that? No.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
I at least can I at least be like, "Oh, that
Do
is a
you
really
notice it
interesting."
and try to work
Yeah.
on it? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Where I'm like,
That's right.
"Wow, that's a blind spot for me." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And which is not
Yeah.
so blind anymore, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I
Hmm.
don't know, Dana, at the end of this, it's like, I don't know if I feel better or worse about it.
I think we're just acknowledging the struggle,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that, like, for me, getting an answer to something helps that. And when you
Yeah.
said, did you have the feeling or the thought first? And I think it was the feeling. It just felt like rejection.
Yeah.
And for me, if I feel that rejection, I
Yeah.
can trigger into shutdown almost simultaneously. And then it's like, oh
Boom.
crap, it's going to take a while to get out of this. So
Yeah.
it is about kind of learning your triggers and that kind of stuff, but really validating this is out there. You're going to have those run ins with the neurotypical world, and go to where you can to find that support and that place of safety with whatever you need to do to get there.
Yeah, the place of safety. I really like that. And then how do we help people establish that place of safety that they can
Mm-hmm.
access independently?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
often, like, because the thoughts are going so quick and fast, and so there's just so
Mm-hmm.
many of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that having that third party, that therapy, oh, hi, Charlie, that
There's Charlie.
person, to help with just slowing things down or putting a
Yeah.
frame to it or putting the
Yeah.
brakes on, that can be
Mm-hmm.
helpful. But, we want people to have that internal structure for
Yeah,
themselves.
or like you're like to me, if I was upset about that work thing, going to the work thing wasn't the go-to. I talked about it with my wife, and then she was framing some things, and I was like, "Oh, or help me understand this." So sometimes it's outside of the system that
Yeah.
you're working in. Yeah, for
Yeah.
those that
Yeah.
are only on
Perspective.
voice, Charlie's getting comfortable here in my lap.
Charlie, for those of you that are only in the audio world, Charlie is sitting on Dana's lap, and we were talking about how darn adorable and cute she is.
Yeah,
Um, the other, though, is that we're also saying that how cute, like, doggies are and puppies are and, like, kittens are and stuff is like a
yeah.
complete survival mechanism.
It's so we love them with their. Oh yeah, because otherwys we'd get mad at
We
them,
would
and
just,
yeah,
just,
you
I mean,
can't
look,
stay mad at this
how
face very
how
long.
could you
Yeah.
be mad with that face? Like,
Hey, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm okay. Just give it a good. If you're
adorable.
interested in, she is Charlie underscore the underscore multiple on Instagram. She has her own
She has her own
account.
Instagram. She's probably
So
living like the best life right now.
yeah, she look. Doesn't she look like she's suffering? Doesn't she look like
Totally.
we beat her?
I mean,
No, she is surrounded by a place of safety, which
yeah,
is then you can look like this if the world
yeah.
is nothing but safe. Yeah.
Mine just looks high all the time. So I could pick him up, but he really does look high. I mean, everyone says
Yeah.
that, like, wow, it's like,
His little third
listen,
eyelids are always up. He always looks like he's
always,
stoned.
yeah, yeah. I
Maybe that's
mean,
why he's hungry all the time.
why do you,
We're devolving now. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Oh my God, it's too funny.
all
Yeah.
right, everyone. Well, on that note, be
Yeah.
good to you, be good to others, be good to
And
your pets,
find
whether
your place of safety. Yeah.
find your place.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I mean,
There
hey,
you
that's a
go.
good,
Yeah.
because look at Charlie.
Right. So good.
There you
Yeah.
go. All
Yeah.
right. All right, everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.